So please take your seat. Well, we'll start our meeting. C'est pas celle-là. Okay. So thank you for coming here and welcome to all for this 13th edition of the Community of Users. As you will note, there will be some changes in comparison to what for the one who are used to come to this meeting. We are testing actually thematic discussions which are a little bit more organized with respect to the gathering of projects, not only research and capacity building, and gathering of actors. So you will have this week 4 different themes in sequence. One on disaster risk reduction and resilience, one on cybercrime, another one on standardization coordination, and the third one on cybercrime and security. So here today and tomorrow morning, we will be focusing on disaster risk reduction and resilience. I will just make a very short reminder of what is the CoU, why in a way you are here as our users, direct users, and what you may expect from it on the long run, actually, on what are the perspectives. We will have a common introduction. We'll have a breakout. If you did not succeed to have lunch, you will have some sandwiches in the breakout, so just for you to know, because it's my case, so I will need to survive and just pass by. Then you will have to choose your different panels. There will be one, the larger one here in this room, and 2 downstairs. So just check where are your panels, and you will be meeting your conveners. Tomorrow the same thing. There will be 3 different panels. A common conclusion that will be live streamed. So common introduction is live streamed. Common conclusion will be live streamed as well, and a poster session, and we'll say goodbye. So it's a short meeting, but as I will mention, it's also to ensure that we are gathering in a larger network. Just as a recall, very quickly, we have to, and you have to, rely on EU policies in what you are doing. And here, this is our main, I would say, policy customers in a way. We are working in disaster risk reduction mainly with DG ECO, obviously, on civil protection, international cooperation DEFCO. We are also a lot of contacts with DG Santé for health aspects, DG Environment, for example, water-related threats, or Seveso, DG Climate, obviously, for everything related to climate-related disaster. We have also some contacts with DG EAC, Education and Culture Radio. We try to ensure that indeed the research that we are funding and capacity building projects to which we know are really tailor-made to support the implementation of these policies, and if needed, the development of these policies, which is not easy because indeed you need to have a strong networking. We are also in contact with intergovernmental agencies. Here, not so much about disaster risk reduction here, because this is mainly for security, Europol and so on, but with UN bodies. And for example, you will hear today there is a representation of UN ISDR, so the Sinai Framework for Action. We have contact with UNESA for chemical accidents and so on. We try to ensure that we are coherent with what the policy are doing and report to your network possible updates of what they are doing, just to ensure that we are on the same wavelength. So here in this room, you have representative of these policies. We are also trying, but this is not easy, we are trying to ensure that the type of instruments that we are dealing with, not only Horizon 2020 on research, but also capacity building, are being represented. So if you see here, Horizon 2020, we have different DGs which are dealing with Horizon 2020. with executive agencies. We will have a colleague from a research executive agency telling something more. We have the Joint Research Center, which is also very active in research, funding by DGSC as well. We have CBRN projects funded by the European Defence Agency, and so on. All this, I would say, part of research has a link also with capacity building projects which are funded also by different DGs. For example, here, Life Plus by DG Environment, DG ECO capacity building project, and Instrument for Security Funds by DG Home and Migration, International Cooperation, Interreg, and I certainly forget some. You see the potential which is completely lost in not linking this project together, because we have very often, and I'm called in conferences, I know some projects dealing with research, and then suddenly I see in a conference that there are 2 or 3 projects funded by DG ECO, by Interreg, which are in direct continuation of the research. And we don't know that necessarily, we don't connect them. And then if you go a little bit further, because I'm also dealing with academic work in my other life, I realize that in Marie Curie Fellowship, Erasmus, there are projects which are also related to training and education, which are linked to this. We don't make the link between research capacity building, training and education, which is, well, a nonsense. It's not about willingness, it's because we are all working, you know, we are all riding our bicycle, looking just in front of the street. We are not looking at the trees around. And we are looking, we are forgetting completely the landscape. So we need to ensure that when we can, we are gathering these projects together, at least to establish a dialogue among them, and ensure that we have a strong database that for you as users, it can be policymakers, industry SMEs, practitioners, you have access to this information for different themes. So this is really an impulse that we want to give to the community of users. So this, you know that already. With respect to policy, we are ensuring that the different streams of policies are being represented when we are meeting regularly. We are trying to ensure that the critical leading projects are also there. We are not yet there because we did a mapping which is available. It's a tremendous number of projects, but we'll do more and more, I would say, this kind of synergy effort. We need to have networks, think tanks, networks of practitioners, networks related to projects, also present to help us linking these 2 worlds and ensuring that we have also the feedback from industry SMEs regarding market dimension. This is quite complex, but it's the only way where we can really link efficiently to users with a coherent approach. So this, you know that already. I just would like to stress what we will have today and tomorrow morning. So we decided to focus on 9 different sub-themes, but keeping these thematic groups, well, called disaster risk and reduction. So, well, I will not repeat what is written here. You have chosen to be in one of the panels. You will have one, obviously, chair that will animate the discussions. What we would like to see on the long run, because today and tomorrow, you will exchange information on your own projects, on your feedback as practitioners, policymaker, industry, and there will be people in the room that will take notes and that will prepare briefing material that you will see, I would say, publicly available, so CoU briefs. On the long run, what we would like to see is to have so it's a try, we'll see whether it works or not. On the long run, we would like to have a strong liaison with different projects that we'll identify, and we will need a leadership. And for having a leadership, we need a governance mechanism. So just to let you know that we are engaging into discussions to make this platform sustainable towards a strong governance mechanism. We are starting to have discussions with policy DGs, member states, and different projects. And we will, from April to July, really see what are the different projects or different networks, different policy DGs, what could be the role and the leadership for these different thematic groups. We need to give missions to thematic groups to deliver concrete outputs that will be of interest to these users. In other words, if I would be a user, I would dream to get once per year a paper that would reflect on what have we done in research, for example, in flood risk management. What have we done in research, capacity building, education? What is the policy update? What is the new thing that I need to reflect for my research? What are the views from the policymakers at EU or the national level? What are the views from the practitioners? So we need to have this kind of work being done, and it cannot be done in isolation. So we need to have a leadership, but we need also to ensure that all the projects concerned in the different countries will play the game properly and, will be willing to cooperate, to share knowledge, and to ensure that even, for example, international events will provide useful input to this discussion. We have this year to test it. Next year, in October, we will discuss this governance mechanism. We have further thematic groups on security, more on security in September, protection of public spaces, critical infrastructure, fight against crime and terrorism, and border security in September. And then we have the security research conference in Helsinki on the 6th and 7th of November. This is a tight timeline which will lead us to test, implement what could become a sustainable community of users in the future. And I mean could, because we are really testing this, and with the hope that when we will start Horizon Europe, early 2021, we have a very strong exchange platform in place that will enable all of you to get access to information when you need, very quickly, that you get access to contact in different countries when you need, that you get access to annual state-of-the-art report that gives you really a strong report of what has been done during the year, and so on. So it's not, until now it has been very nice, it's a nice place, you will have a nice social gathering. Stay here tonight because it will be quite special. So it is putting human in our discussions. We forget very often that we are dealing with a lot of bureaucracy, but human should be central. Here you are, for this reason, in this place, in this circumstance, we are putting back human in our discussions. I would like to invite Valeria from Research Executive Agency. We'll say a few words about the partnership, very strong partnership. We are belonging to the same entity. So Valeria, please.
Shall I take the left hand?
If you want to,
or
because it's here, or you can.
Yeah. Well, good afternoon to all of you. I am in the REA, the Research Executive Agency, the head of the team of project officer who help you. I'm addressing the project coordinators, support your own project in the implementation phase, so during the project life cycle. I would like to thank Philippe for the opportunity you have given today to me, but to me in the sense of to the REA to be on this stage and to address directly this group of persons, and in particular the thematic group 1, because it is around this very same group, the DRS actually topics and calls, that we started together back in 2014. So with some pioneering colleagues and some pioneering project guided by Philippe as our leading father. So we have been meeting so far around these tables, and I've been discussing with you, I think bilaterally, with many of you of your own projects. Yet the REA, as an institution, has been playing more and more a significant role over the last few years in the organization, the setting up of the agenda. You have been in contact with the project officers of the REA for the invitation and for the development of the content that you are proposing here. And today I do not want necessarily to focus on the content, on the evolution of the work in DRS or in the concept of resilience, because we will be here hearing directly from you, from the scientists and from the end users. But I really want to focus on 3 key elements that we think are really key now and will be, I hope, even more in the future. And these key elements are strictly related to who we are in the REA and what we do. The first of all is the relation I'm addressing not the colleagues of the Commission, of course, but you as coordinators, the relation you have with your project officer. Many times I find that you deal with them more on administrative aspects, on how to implement an amendment to your contracts, how to organize review meetings, how to reshuffle person months or budget. Yet I would like you, this is an invitation which goes to you, but in parallel goes to the POs of the REA as well, to engage in a more content-related discussion. Because it is like this that we can provide more meaningful feedback to our colleagues of the Commission, to our parent DG, of course, but to the policy DGs at large via them. So, you know already some of the activities that in REA we organize, that the project officer organize. We try as much as possible to cluster projects which have commonalities. We organize or we facilitate the organization of conferences or workshops precisely to gather knowledge, content, and to streamline the work that you can do. The POs, this I want to underline, themselves are very knowledgeable in their project portfolio, meaning they are very knowledgeable in the content of your project. So the invitation for you is to exploit this, to engage in a more content-related discussion with them. And this will really provide valuable material for the Commission. This is the very first point that I wanted to mention. The second is directly related to the first. I'm sure that many of you have been have been invited at the end of your project or towards the end to draft a so-called concluding paper, sometimes called a white paper or position paper, which is not a contractual obligation. It's not a deliverable which is written in your grant. Yet it's something really precious for us. So what is this concluding paper or white paper? We do not have a template for this. Well, we are thinking about it, we are working together whether it should be the case to have one. But so far we have thought that your own specificities would merit to be treated in a very personalized way. Yet, we think that a concluding paper, especially in the area of DRS, could include some common point. The main outcome of your project, of course. The lessons learned. In what? Well, depending on the project, I would say certainly in how to break down silos in the method of work and in working with, for example, end users or city administrations or public authorities or politicians at large. Lessons learned on standardization, which is becoming an important cross-cutting issue. And last but not least, recommendations for the Commission, and especially on work on topics of future research. So I said last, but I underlined not least, because this concluding paper have the ultimate goal to feed back the Commission with the really practical outcome of your work and to be of inspiration for them and for the successive work programs. So my second invitation is when your PO, because I have the perception in talking bilaterally to them that sometimes there is some unclarity of some resistance, when your PO asks you or proposes to you to write a concluding paper, So first, be sure that this is an indication that your work is successful. And we all think that you have something very relevant to say. And second, well, be receptive to this and engage. Again, it's not a contractual obligation, but it's very welcome. And again, be sure that this document would be highly appreciated by all of us. We have recent examples of such concluding papers. If I understood correctly, they will be distributed, together with the minutes of this meeting in the next few days. I just mentioned the DRS7 project, SMR. They collectively wrote one last year, and now individually. I was mentioning SMR, Resolute, Darwin. This was the second point. I will be extremely brief on the third, which is you individually as potential experts for our project. You know that we are heavily, Dorea is evaluating, responsible for the evaluations. We use heavily the experts, and all of you, if not done it yet, please go and register in the portal, because you could be really valuable elements for us to select the best proposal for funding. Thank you very much, and I wish you really fruitful and successful days.
Thank you very much, Valeria. I would like then we will enter into the more policy section. So I would like to invite Franziska Otte from DG ECO, and I think, yeah, okay. I guess I will give this to you. I don't know if you want to have the standing alone microphone on this one.
I will take this one.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Thank you also. Thank you also from my side for this very warm welcome, Philippe. I will be talking to you now about the Union Civil Protection Mechanism and give an insight about some recent developments, as we've got quite some interesting changes also under the mechanism recently. So let's start fresh. Maybe as a reminder very quickly, what is the Union Civil Protection Mechanism, or in short UCPM? Under the mechanism, we've got joint disaster prevention and preparedness actions for natural and also for man-made disasters inside and outside of the European Union. And these joint actions are being coordinated by the European Commission's Emergency Response Coordination Center, ERCC. So just very briefly, how does it work? Countries, the participating states under the mechanism, offer certain capacities that they have to a joint European civil protection pool. And then if a disaster strikes, the affected country can make a request for assistance, and the European Emergency Response Coordination Center coordinates the assistance that participating states have offered, and of course always under the prerequisite that the country affected also needs help and accepts help. Yes, no disaster takes us by surprise, so to say, in DG ECO, as the ERCC is permanently operated, meaning that colleagues are there 365 days a year, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. So it's a permanent structure, and it has responded to more than 300 emergencies since 2001. Yes, currently also colleagues are in the process of deploying help to Mozambique and have already sent several modules. So that's to the very recent developments. Okay, just to give a short overview, what we have in the pool is quite broad in terms of expertise. There is modules, there's experts, there's also advisory missions in all different sorts of areas. There's, in blue, you see water-related capacities. There's also search and rescue capacities, medical capacities, marine or capacities related to marine pollution. Then the green ones are firefighting capacities, CBRN, and support capacities. So really very broad spectrum of capacities that we can deploy under the Union Civil Protection Mechanism. It is a mechanism that is working rather well. This is also how President Juncker sees it. in his State of the Union speech last summer, he said that the Union Civil Protection Mechanism is Europe at its best, and he called for a strengthening of the European Civil Protection Mechanism and also to make actions under the mechanism more visible. And this is what we've done with our legislative proposal during all of last year. So at the end of 2017, the Commission proposed a new legislative proposal, and in only just about a bit longer than 1 year, we managed to adopt the proposal and get it through quite tough legislative negotiations. So the new decision has entered into force only last week, so it's really brand new now. And together with the decision, there's also already the first implementing act already adopted last week also. And this is what I will be speaking now a little bit about. The revised proposal shall strengthen both parts of the mechanism, preventive actions, but also actions in response to disasters. And here we see a little system on the response capacities that we've got in European civil protection. It goes without saying that, of course, the backbone of civil protection in the European Union is local and national capacities. These will always be the first ones that respond to a disaster, no matter what kind of a disaster it is. Local and national capacities are always, of course, also the closest to arrive to the incident of the disaster. But on top of that, situations are imaginable where a country might need assistance because a disaster is extraordinary and is affecting a country more than what could have been forecasted. And therefore, countries can offer some capacities that they've got available in their national civil protection to a European so-called civil protection pool for mutual assistance. And then this is the case that I described in the very beginning. If then a disaster strikes, these capacities can come to the help of an affected country. With the new legislation, we now strengthened this European civil protection pool even further. And it is still also the central element of the Union Civil Protection Mechanism. Still, what we did with the legislation is also to introduce a new element, which is called RESC-EU. And RESC-EU is a safety net. This is how we describe it. And it is for extraordinary disasters in that a country may be overwhelmed by a certain disaster, and where also the capacities that are available in the European Civil Protection Pool are no longer sufficient to respond to the disaster. This might be the case especially if several disasters strike simultaneously in the European Union, as has been the case, for example, with the forest fires in 2017, where with simultaneous forest fires in Portugal, Greece, and Spain. And there we saw, for instance, that capacities were not enough. And this is what triggered the development of RESC-EU. RESC-EU capacities are in ownership of member states, but are co-financed by a large percentage through the European Union. And it is also the Commission who takes the decision on the deployment of these capacities. Currently, we're still in the process of defining in what areas RESC-EU capacities shall be established. In the legislation, we have laid out that they shall be established in areas where currently we see gaps in civil protection. And this is also where you come in as researchers and as first responder organizations, because of course areas that where there are gaps, these need to be further investigated. And we've now, from recent deployments, we've seen that there might be gaps in the areas of aerial forest firefighting, also in the area of medical response and health emergencies, and in the areas of in the area of CBRN protection. And these are all topics that we are currently further investigating on, and are also we also commissioned a study on this regarding possible gaps on a risk with a risk-based approach. Okay, another element that I forgot to mention is the axis that you see. So the place where we see European civil protection has probably the highest added value is for such disasters that are very unlikely, but at the same time with a high impact. So the low probability, high impact disasters that it might also be more cost efficient to prepare for on a European level rather than on a national level, because they are so rare. And this is currently really also a policy priority for DG ECHO to do further research on the high impact, low probability risks and disasters. We also strengthen preventive measures with the mechanism. We have created further incentives for member states to do good risk assessments, to further develop risk management capability. And we also introduced a new element here for member states to create risk management plans in the future. And here again, we incentivize member states to focus especially on cross-border risks and on risks, these low-high risks with a low probability and high impact. The balancing mechanism, I will not go into the details now, but just to say in very briefly, these are provisions about further strengthening the prevention culture and also the responsibility element. So we're now coming closer and closer to research. We've also, with the new legislative proposal that entered into force last week, we are also introducing a few new specific objectives of the Union Civil Protection Mechanism. And among these is also an increase in the availability and use of scientific knowledge on disasters, and another objective also to step up the cooperation and coordination activities at cross-border level and amongst member states prone to the same type of disasters. So we really want to, as DG ECHO, we really want to get more involved in better disseminating the already existing research results, which is also why we appreciate Philippe's organization of this event so much. Another new element that has been introduced under the revised Union Civil Protection Mechanism is the so-called Union Civil Protection Knowledge Network. This network is about strengthening the training and also the knowledge component in disaster risk management. It shall be based on existing structures. Therefore, it shall connect existing centers of excellence, existing universities, researchers, professionals, and also volunteers with one another, and facilitate training and the exchange of good practice. The Union Civil Protection Knowledge Networks shall also stimulate research and innovation and strengthen cooperation in international organizations, with international organizations and training. The next steps that we've got ahead of ourselves now is the very immediate one, to be ready with our new civil protection system on European level for the 2019 forest fire season. That's the immediate objective that we've got. But also there's, of course, still some ongoing work. There is several implementing acts for the new decision still under preparation that shall also set a clearer policy tone. Then there is the guidelines on reporting on risk management activities still under preparation. And also we're still in the process of defining other capacities that are needed as part of RESC-EU. Yes, so much from my side. Thanks for your attention. And yeah, I hope it became clear why we're so interested in research and in this event also. I'm really looking forward to hearing the rest of the presentations over the day. In case there are any questions, I will be here also throughout the whole day, so feel free to approach me, maybe also on the breaks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Franziska. Well, to the research community, you see that there are challenges that has to be expected regarding, for example, risk assessments. When you have a deadline in December 2020, and that you think that you have inputs that you might recommend, for example, to DG ECHO, you don't give that in November 2020. You just say you have give it maybe 1 year before. So it means that by the end of the year, if you think and you have something to contribute, I'm speaking on your behalf, Franziska, you need to ensure that your input will be given by the end of the year if you want to have a chance that it is reflected into inputs to this risk assessment. Just to ensure that the anticipation is well understood, because very often we miss opportunities only because we are reacting too late. And with this, I would like to, I'm very happy because Hans Siestra is from my previous water family, water policy family. So, well, I'm very happy that you could come, Hans, to give some words on the flood directive state of play. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Philippe. Does this work? Yeah, it works, no? It's difficult to hear from here, but it seems to be functioning. Yeah, my name is probably not in the program, but I was asked to replace my colleague Johannes Cavadas at the last minute. I work for DG Environment for the unit dealing with the Water Framework Directive and the Floods Directive, and it's on the Floods Directive that I would like to say a few things today. I would like to just maybe recall what this Floods Directive is about. I didn't make any presentation, but just for you to remember what this one is about. It's a 2007 directive that requires the member states to produce by 2011 a flood risk assessment for the territory. Then by 2013, flood risk maps. And by 2015, a flood risk management plan. And this is a management plan that should then be valid for the period 2015 to 2021. And most member states have indeed done that. And the two things I would like to talk about is first, the assessment that we have just made of the flood risk management plans. And the second is the fitness check that we have currently ongoing of the Floods Directive. First of all, on this assessment of the flood risk management plan, so we have received 25 or 26 of those flood risk management plans, or at least from 25 or 26 member states, we have received flood risk management plans on time for us to do an assessment of their quality, of the degree to which they are properly implementing the requirements of the Floods Directive. We have only a few weeks ago published that entire assessment, which consists of 25 individual reports, so one for each member state that we looked at, plus a set of recommendations for that member state and also a set of overall recommendations. And from those conclusions, we have seen that the member states have, in general terms, really fundamentally embraced this whole concept of flood risk management in their territory. And I think that's a very important result, that all of them are currently doing that. But we see at the same time that whilst the concept is embraced, the plans are made, there are still sustained efforts needed in order to properly follow up on all those plans and to implement them in practice and to prepare new plans in the future. Another point is that there is growing evidence, as we all know, of the impact of climate change on flood risk throughout Europe. And as of 2021, member states, this is the legislation, member states need to take that into consideration more than they do at the moment. So, and at the moment they are doing that to a degree. About half of them have really properly integrated that and have made a link to the national adaptation strategy, but that's not the case everywhere, and so there's certainly room for improvement, as we have found in our assessment. The second point, as I mentioned, is the fitness check that we are carrying out for the Floods Directive. A fitness check is basically an evaluation, but then for a number of pieces of legislation at the same time. So in this particular case, the Floods Directive is being evaluated together with the Water Framework Directive and the Groundwater Directive and the Directive on Environmental Quality Standards, and is carried out in parallel with another important piece of water legislation, namely the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive. As I said, we're doing this at the moment, we're in the middle of it, and we should be able to produce a report by the end of October of this year, which is by the end of the term in office of this Commission. It's an evaluation, so this is a purely backward-looking exercise. We're not explicitly not looking into possible changes for the future, although, of course, everyone who is involved in reading that evaluation will spot the gaps and will maybe conclude that there might be a few things that need to be changed. Although that's currently not really our impression for the Floods Directive. So we're in the middle of it. We don't have final conclusions, of course, of this evaluation, of this fitness check, sorry. But I just want to give a few observations that I think we can still make even this early on. To be kept in mind that we're actually it's very early days in the implementation of the Floods Directive. As I said, in 2011, risk assessment, in 2013, risk maps, and then in 2015, the first plan. And so what member states have produced now is really their first risk management plan. And it's hard to draw any kind of definitive conclusions on how well the system works when we have only really gone through the very first full cycle. Under the heading of relevance, you will know that the Commission always uses the same 5 standard areas to evaluate its policies. Under the heading of relevance, it is quite clear to us that this piece of legislation continues to be relevant. It will be even more relevant taking into account the impact of climate change on the continent. And it's also showing to be relevant for achieving other policy objectives in the water area, at least. Of course, particularly when it comes to managing water quantity, but also some water quality aspects. We have no indication that there is no support for this piece of legislation from the side of stakeholders or citizens. And we have found that it is supporting the research and development and the development of technology, certainly when it comes to things like mapping or visualization techniques, etc. So we found it to be quite instrumental in that regard. When it comes to efficiency, that's one that is very difficult to establish. That would require a clear estimate of the cost and the benefit of this piece of legislation. There the picture is extremely diverse, not only in the sense of that there are simply very different levels of investment when it comes to flood protection in member states, but also the methodology for that would allow us to compare those investments and the benefits is not really available to us. So we find it very difficult to come with very strong conclusion when it comes to comparing the costs of implementing the Floods Directive with the benefits of it. What we see on the side of administrative costs, that those are really quite moderate, and we also do not think that there are any, or at least not many, administrative burdens that are flowing from the implementation of this directive. When it comes to effectiveness, again, as I said, we are early days in the implementation of this one. So what we can establish is whether there has been progress made when it comes to the procedural steps that have to be taken for the implementation of this directive. And there the answer is clearly yes, there is very good follow-up on the procedural requirements, whether the directive is already delivering in practice, so in terms of reducing flood risk or reducing the damage caused by floods throughout Europe, is for the moment is not possible, at least not so early in the fitness check, is not possible yet to establish. Finally, one weak point that we found in the when it comes to effectiveness is that member states have not really always established in a very in a very clear way, in a very measurable way, what their objectives were. So to really have a clear path between the measures taken and the objectives to be achieved hasn't been possible. And if you are a bit mean, then you might think that member states are anyway implementing what they were planning to implement, and that the link between that and the flood risk management isn't all that strong. But that perhaps might be a bit of a mean way of looking at it. Finally, I think on coherence, no fundamental doubts on our side about the internal coherence of the legislation. In terms of coherence with other policy areas, again, climate change is the one where potentially there is an issue. But as I said, the legislation does require member states as of 2021 only to take this into consideration in a systematic way. For the rest, I think in principle there is good coherence with other policy objectives, such as nature protection, such as managing water quality and managing water quantity. Whether that is happening in practice is another question. At the theoretical level, let's say at the level of the legislation, we feel it's well organized. Whether that is as well organized in practice remains to be seen. I would like to leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Hans. Well, I would like to invite, there are two more speakers to whom you will find back in panels because they will chair two panels. So maybe I will invite Tom and Andrew to try to be a little bit shorter because we are a little bit late in time, and I would not like to jeopardize panel time. So Tom will give some words on the RMKC, and Andrew, where is Andrew? Okay, you will speak about UNS there. And if you have some questions to be posed to the speakers, please use the breaking time. There will be half an hour. You will be able to ask them directly questions. So they are supporting me here, but will not have a question response.
Good afternoon. I am Tom de Groeve. I work at the Joint Research Center. I'm the Deputy Head of Unit of the Disaster Risk Management Unit. And of course, this event is very important for us as it squarely falls in our mandate. You surely all know the GRC. We do research. We're the DG in the Commission that does a lot of research. We have a group of 60 scientists and many consultants working on things like the Copernicus program, supporting the RescEU in many ways, working on guidelines, working on early warning systems, etc., etc. So many concrete things. But 2 years ago, the GRC transformed significantly and got a new strategy to not only do research of added value, of course, to the member states, but also to do knowledge management. And this is a new mandate, a new objective that we have set ourselves, and that has been supported a lot by all the other DGs to help have evidence more at the heart of policy making, coherence among the different policies based on evidence, and not one evidence here and one evidence there. So knowledge management is critical in this, and the GRC wants to play a big role in this. This has also aspects like foresight, like translating science to the language of the policymaker, etc., etc. For this, you probably also know that the GRC has created knowledge centers. And knowledge centers are a new entity embedded in the GRC, but really done together with other Commission services to drive their purpose and their objectives in areas such as migration and demography, territorial policies, bioeconomy, etc., including also the disaster risk management. We were the first knowledge center, and we were really more or less at the same time as the community of users was starting. We were active in the field, working very closely together, and indeed we have already done many things together that you probably heard in earlier sessions of this too. And it's important. Knowledge management is not easy. Many of the speakers before have already said that we have to do more of it. We have to be more coherent, network, etc. And we try to play our bit in it. A lot has to do with being multidisciplinary, and many in the room here are from different disciplines, be they a geophysicist or a hydrologist or IT scientist or even communication scientists and management scientists, many different fields. So it's a very complex area where people need to talk to each other and indeed learn their language. But on the other side, it's not easier. On the policy side, sometimes scientists may think it must be easy and they don't understand us, but often it's the other way around, that the complexities of doing policy and the pressures that are playing there are extremely complicated, and both communities must, of course, learn to work with each other. In the Knowledge Center, one of the key things is to distill knowledge. There's so much out there, so many programs in Europe. Of course, this room and this event is critical. The framework programs are so important, but there's more. There's research at member state level. There's global research, etc., from different fields and climate change in so many areas. So how to get this all together? And a few things that you probably are aware of, or maybe can look up. Concrete things that we have done over the past years that may be of interest to you. One is a summary of science. We have written a big book with trying to reach out to everyone in Europe to write in a very short way all their knowledge in many aspects. I don't know if everybody knows this book. It's the Science for Disaster Risk Management 2017. Which was presented at the Global Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction. It's not our book, it's your book. There were 200 authors from the whole community, also international. And this year we're doing it again, and I hope many of you are involved in writing the new book, which really is it's still very big, but it summarizes so many aspects that it is very useful. This is now used as a curriculum in academic programs. It's used to talk to policymakers. It's used outside of Europe. It's being translated in Spanish. So it's a good piece of knowledge management that worked and that we want to keep doing. Another one is summarizing research projects, and again with Philippe very closely we try to have all the research projects on a platform in our knowledge center where you can look up who is what networks, etc. Plus doing analysis, and the first example of this analysis on forest fires. I don't know if the brochure is on the table, but there's some brochures. Yeah, maybe you can put it. That was done with RTD, but also in collaboration with the GRC to again extract lessons about gaps and possible futures. That is really what we want to do more. Writing the guidelines for DG ECHO for ResCoU, we are involved in that. But again, trying to benefit from all the science that's been done. It's kind of a gateway of what works, the best things, trying to put it in the right form, working on it, analyzing it, putting a bit added value to it until it is really useful for policymakers and can be used. Innovation is another part, how to really innovate crisis management. After projects have demonstrated solutions that work, how are they adopted by member states or by Commission services? And often it has to be demonstrated, it has to, it needs an additional effort. One thing we did in the Knowledge Center is kind of give nudge funding, try to work with people like, why don't you try to implement it? And we give them a very small amount, so they look at the solution, they take the time to have a solution, and then if it it's proven that it has an added value, then the member states, of course, has to do it themselves. So a wide range of activities. This is just a few examples of what this Knowledge Center concretely does. In the changing landscape of networking, but mainly now the new aspect of the knowledge network that will be very instrumental in our area here, where there will be budgets available for more networking, for more uptake of science into practice. we have to see how we keep working all together. And so networking is very important. This event is very important also for us to be in contact with you and with others. Especially then for us to see what our own added value is, which solutions do we take, which solutions do we work on more to then put in sustainable solutions like Copernicus program or Aristotle or many of these things where we've been involved in. And the final thing that I wanted to say is that being active in a broad area, so not only civil protection, but also disaster risk, inside and outside of Europe, because there's also the whole aspect of disaster risk outside of Europe, and in climate change adaptation, all in the same unit, really helps to, again, translate and transfer solutions across all these spheres and build this coherence in there. So whatever comes in this community is also broad. We try to bring in the Knowledge Center to these other communities. So I'm very looking forward to the discussions here. I hope to learn a lot, and I hope we can then be of use also to you. So please approach me if you want to learn more about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom. And we will finish this common introduction by a snapshot on the Sendai Framework for Action. You have a lot of people may wonder what is this strange animal that is very often quoted in the research topics of the DRS topics. So Andrew will guide you into it.
I had a few slides.
Yeah.
Yes, super. And a pointer. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll keep it very short. I know I'm now here between coffee and you. I'll see some of you afterwards in the first thematic breakout session. So we could go into these details into a little bit more depth, as well as over coffee and hopefully a little bit later during the day. So I'm just going to send you some questions here, some pictures. They don't need explaining, and some questions which I think can guide and refresh a little bit and trigger a bit of thinking in terms of what we could take out of those days and a half, or at least out of the next week, and the broader work that's been presented so far. Are we ready for climate change? What can science and innovation tell us? Let's not forget that question. The policymakers are always asking themselves, where can I find, what do I have available? The community of users, I think, is trying to fit that gap and bridge that exercise in the context of security research, but research and capacity building tools and exercises are enormous in terms of scope. As Tom was saying, they're not just European, they're broader. We at the United Nations have a global scope. I work for the regional office, but we engage globally through partnerships and so on. And so that element is important. And what is actually needed? And I think that's where it's important to have so many Commission representatives reminding what at an EU level is important. And we at a UN level trying to support the member states in understanding what has been committed to and agreed to in the context of international frameworks, and where could the work you're doing on a day-to-day fit in that context. I'm just giving another set of examples which is contributing directly to the increased potential vulnerability of our societies as well as our exposure, the questions of demography, urbanization. Again, just some teasers for you to think about in looking at disaster risk reduction, which sometimes can be looked at very much from a response and preparedness perspective. So we want to bring back to the table the underlying risk factors, the underlying risk drivers, the underlying elements that make our societies more at risk, and not necessarily talk about the response components. There are also a whole range of new and emerging risks, black swans, grey rhinos, dragon kings, what you want to, new names, however you may want to name them, are there on our radar? Are we equipped? The Commission has come out with a very ambitious set proposal of its RescEU initiative, some reinforced elements on prevention. How is that looking at high impact, low probability events? It is very welcome to see such effort from the Commission across the different services also. So we want at the UN to put those elements on the radar. We are also in a learning process of understanding what are these new risks that the UN community can help member states in having capacity and understanding of. And I think this is where the link between the UN's global drive, but at practical level, the technical knowledge you can feed in as an important critical element. I'm just quoting one which we have started to put on our radar. The Sendai framework tells us that, yes, it is not only about natural hazard, it is also about technological man-made hazards. Cyber risks is for us a very big unknown unknown in the community of disaster risk reduction. Here I know the project managers, project coordinators engage primarily in a lot on the security element. What do you have to tell us in the disaster risk reduction world as to what you know about interconnected systems, how we are increasingly vulnerable to an element where DRR communities, civil protection or other sectors have to know how to respond, to prepare for, and hopefully to also be able to prevent these elements. I'll keep it short, but this is the framework that we are custodians of and support member states at national level as our primary clients in delivering, but it has a very strong local component and has a very strong element about reinforcing the evidence base. I will not go into detail about that, but I'm here for that if you have any questions of how your work may fit in detail, but this is to give you a broad scope. It is a shift from managing disasters to managing disaster risks, and what that means is a continuous discussion, people-centered preventive approach to disaster risk reduction. The primary responsibility remains with the states, but with the involvement of all the stakeholders that are engaging across society. So a very complex architecture that we have to get our heads around, and thank you, Philippe, again for convening here, because this is one of these few occasions where we can have the security research community together, which is not necessarily a direct stakeholder for our community of risk reduction, to engage and find out a little bit more about what is done beyond the DRS call in Horizon 2020. Sendai framework covers a number of hazard areas, as I was mentioning, some new components of disaster risks, and it tries to set 7 key targets in terms of reducing some key elements which would allow us to understand how our resilience to disasters evolves, whether we are able to reduce mortality rates, reduce the impact on the population, on infrastructure, but also increase our capacity to have the right governance structures through strategies as well as coordination, cooperation at international level outside of Europe, again, a global framework, and looking at risk information and awareness of risk, awareness of our citizens. All this is a global exercise. We are a little bit like the flood directives links to the UCPM, which links to the research. We are also engaging with other frameworks that have a broader mandate or a more specific mandate, whether it's urban policy, climate, or sustainable development as a whole. And our work at the UN ISDR is to try and see how we manage to integrate the efforts done on DRR specifically in that broader context. So never forget that what you're doing in the context of risk reduction, we try and streamline and we try and expand it in a broader discussion around the overall more politicized discussions of sustainable development. I'm putting here just 3 global targets of the SDGs, which are embedded, or for which the reporting is embedded through the Sendai indicators and targets of the reporting process of the Sendai framework. So the linkages are made, the information is reported back all the way from the local level all to the global level, and the targets are as much as possible consistent with one another. I'm just giving you here, and this is my penultimate slide, a few ideas of what is being done at UN level in terms of driving the exercise forward. It is not very science related, but it gives you an idea of the policy and policy frameworks in place, or at least technical frameworks in place, which we value and prioritize and push for at a UN level vis-a-vis national member states. Whether it is the fact that there is an active Sendai focal point to whom to engage, wherever that person may be based, whether it's a civil protection authority, environmental ministry, or other, the role and critical role of strategies, not only at national level, but also at local level, and the involvement, and I think I want to make an emphasis on this one, the role of national platforms. This is a multi-stakeholder convening at national level to discuss and take forward the political agenda around DRR. And this is where stakeholders representing the knowledge industry, the knowledge world, should have and should be able to promote and input some of the work being done there. Here we are talking about a European initiative, but understanding how the national level fits into there would be very interesting. Disaster losses, the reporting process, we always want to know how we are doing vis-a-vis the targets and indicators we're working with. And of course, promoting regional dynamics, and I think the EU is an unquestionable proxy through which to improve our risk reduction measures globally. And what efforts are we looking for? How can research and innovation help? I'm just putting some ideas out there. They're not limited to those. These are just some first thoughts I had when preparing for this intervention to say, okay, what type of disaggregated information do we have? How do we use geospatial information? where is the knowledge and how can we stream that? And hearing about these one-pager briefing notes would be extremely useful beyond the Commission and beyond the community of the EU. We at the UN will make sure to relay that information within the broader partnerships we're engaged in. Awareness of cascading risks. The cascading effects of a flood can be manifold, and understanding the complexity of those risks is critical, and research, science and technology are at the heart of the answer in understanding the steps we have to go to in that direction. Investments, always promoting the notion that risk-informed investments should be the future. Investments in sustainable sources of risk reduction measures is the future. How can we invest in science and technology in the same logic? How can DRR be promoted through those investments? And I just leave you with a couple of quotes. Hopefully coffee now is 5 minutes left. We will all rush to it. I'll be very happy to know also where to host people for the next chairing session. But thank you very much in the meantime. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you to Hans, to Francisca, to Valeria, and to Tom. Well, you see that we are really dealing with a very strong need for integrated approach regarding civil protection, which are dealing with sectorial policies, and we need to really not forget in our research supporting activities that we are tackling not only the international level as Sendai, but also EU through the UCPM and local, the River Basin District and so on. So we need to have the full picture to really show that the tools that are being developed by research is covering the whole chain of type of users. I would like to just take advantage of having all the speakers here to ask questions during the break. We will just break out in different rooms, as I said. Andrew will chair action in support of Sendai framework, so you will go down, I suppose. There is a room downstairs. Yelena, I don't know, Yelena, yeah, you will stay here for climate change adaptation related matters, and you will have Giulio Zuccaro, who made it despite the strike in Belgium. It was a flight or luggage? Flight, okay. So he's there for the thematic 1.3 on geohazards. We will squeeze maybe a little bit, try to make it ended at 4:15. Then you will have immediately a second group coming with Xenia, who will be coming later on community resilience, forecasting extreme events with Diogo, who is here, and forest fire with Nicola. I don't know, is Nicola just arrived? Okay. And I will simply, if you are a little bit late, this is not a problem. It's mainly these rooms that will need to be liberated at 5:30 at the very maximum, because otherwise you will be kicked out by musicians. And I wish you a good breakout and working session.